Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast. We are talking about an excellent TV series from Netflix called The Diplomat on today's episode of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast. I'm Mario Sikora, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts, Dawe and TJ Ingrassia, who are both just back from traveling the world. So, now this seems like a seamless transition to our listeners. You haven't missed a beat here, but it's been quite some time since we've recorded. So TJ, Dawe, tell us where you've been over the past couple of months.
I just did a 6-week tour of 29 cities in the U.S., ending with another stint at a Fringe Festival in Orlando. So 30 cities, all in the U.S., starting in Portland, Oregon. The official tour ended in Knoxville, Tennessee, so many points in between, all driving. And then eventually Orlando. Just got home a week ago.
Wow, that's great. And what were you doing as part of that tour?
I was the director and company manager for a tour in which a psychologist talked about serial killers.
Yeah, there you go. All right, great. And who doesn't want to hear about that? All right.
Women do
want to hear about it.
Exactly. Most of the men in the audience were dragged there. Yeah. A lot of boyfriends and husbands.
Yeah, that's like the late night, cable TV Dateline stuff that, about particularly husbands who kill their wives and that sort of thing are hugely popular, primarily with women. So
for whatever reason, women want that.
Yeah.
Give me more stories of women being mangled, please.
That phenomenon.
Just one more bit of evidence proving that I do not understand women at all. Right, so as my wife would be sure to tell you. All right. So TJ Ingrassia, you've been traveling too. Where have you been?
I was in Germany for the last couple weeks.
Yeah, that's great. What'd you do there?
I was part of I have a buddy who's a history professor and put together sort of a study abroad summer course, and he invited me to come along and participate with him. So
yeah, that's great. Well, that's nice. I was just down in Washington, D.C. for the weekend, so I live in Philadelphia. Washington's a few-hour drive, and my wife and I had a wonderful time at the Omni Shoreham Hotel, which is an old, place where used to be on kind of like the entertainer circuit. Sinatra used to play there. One of the balls where Bill Clinton played saxophone on his inauguration night was there, or election night or something. I forget which one it was. So that's there. We had a great time visiting the city, so a little bit of travel.
While it's still there.
Well, it's still there. Yeah, there was we got to see the Octagon ring they were setting up there, and the blue paint coat on the reflecting pool. So. So anyway,
updates befitting our great nation.
And so I'm gonna force this into a good segue to what we're talking about today, because we are talking about The Diplomat, which is about politics. It's about traveling the world, which you guys have been doing, and it's also about it's kind of a warning not to pick an unnecessary war with Iran or start an unnecessary war with Iran, and the stupidity of doing such a thing, so we can tie that in. So, The Diplomat, TJ Dawe, why don't you tell us about The Diplomat, and then we'll hop into it.
I'd be happy to. And before we do that, Mario, why don't you tell us which subtype we're discussing? What does this relate to?
So we are going to be talking about the navigating type 1, and I think this is an excellent example of the navigating 1, and we'll get into all the reasons why. I think, and we were talking about this a little bit off air, this whole show is about navigating, right? I mean, this is just from minute 1 until the end of, season 3, which is the latest season, I think. It's just all about navigating. It calls to mind the TV series Born, Borgen, which is also on Netflix. It's a Danish TV show about politics there. These make a great kind of bookend set of series to watch. So if you enjoy either of these, check out the other. Right. Go ahead, TJ.
All right. So we're going to be talking about season 1 of The Diplomat, which, as mentioned, is a Netflix series. So far, there are 3 seasons. It's Emmy nominated. I would be shocked if it doesn't have more. So in season 1, the inciting incident, the beginning of the first episode, is there's an explosion on a British naval ship in the Persian Gulf, which winds up killing 41 crew members. It's not clear who did it or why. So career diplomat Kate Wyler, played by Keri Russell, is suddenly appointed as the new U.S. ambassador to Britain. And her husband Hal, played by Rufus Sewell, is also a career diplomat and comes with her. And she works with her staff at the embassy and with the British Foreign Secretary to figure out who's responsible for the attack. Is it Iran? Is it somebody else trying to make it seem like it was Iran? And if it was, then why? And she eventually finds out a big part of the reason she's there is to be evaluated for a possible appointment to be the next vice president of the United States.
Yeah. So what'd you guys think of it? Let me start with TJ Ingrassia. TJ, had you seen this series before we decided to watch it for this?
I had not. I'm woefully behind. There's too many television shows, and I've seen like 4 in the last 20 years. I'm not big on TV shows. But I enjoyed it. I would say it took me a few episodes to kind of get into it. It felt a little bit, there's a House of Cards kind of a feel to it a bit. But obviously really enjoyed, Keri Russell's character. The relationship between her and her husband, Hal, is really the engine of the show. Yeah. And, we're here to talk about Kate primarily, but Hal really is like, he's the juice of the show, I felt like.
Yeah. For sure. He certainly is... the protagonist, he drives a lot of the action, right? In certain ways. So, and we will talk about how. TJ Dawe, how about you? What was your reaction to the series?
I had heard that this was a good series. I was really curious about it. So my partner and I watched a couple episodes maybe a year ago, and we didn't keep it up. And something that became clear as I watched it now as research for this podcast, as we will get into, is the show deals with a lot of subtlety. There's a lot of what's not being said. There's a lot of indirect communication. So this is not a show to watch if you're falling asleep. If you don't have all your faculties, if you don't have the ability to put 2 and 2 together in the subtle ways that the show presents, it rewards full attention. Yeah. So watching it with full attention and taking notes was wonderful.
Yeah. And there are things in season 1 that come back in seasons 2 and 3, right? So there are a lot of little nuggets that the first time through you might not pick up on certain comments and things that the characters say, and then when you're rewatching it, you're saying, "Oh, that's really foreshadowing this." So it is a subtle show, and it's. Again, this is the navigating thing, right? I mean, one of the whenever we're teaching people how to assess types, it's easier to assess preservers and transmitters because you see them doing things that are related to preserving and transmitting. So there are behaviors that are clearly identifiable. Now, you could say the same thing about navigators, but very often it's the lack of doing something. It's the glance, it's the look, it's the question, it's the observation that indicates what's really happening. And if you're not tuned into it, you're just not going to see it. I'll tell you what. So the way we take this, we always start with the type first. Okay, so we're going to talk about what is one-ish about Kate, the Keri Russell character, and then we'll get into the navigating part of it, and then we'll get into what's navigating one about it. Have either of you guys seen The Americans by any chance? The TV series.
I've seen the first 2 seasons of it. Yeah.
Okay. Same actress, Keri Russell, different kind of character, but also, I would argue, a navigating one. And so it does make me wonder about Keri Russell. Is she being typecast? If she, playing something that she is in real life? I don't know a whole lot about her beyond these 2 series. I did not watch... What was the show she was on? Felicity or something? So don't know anything about that. But there are definitely character themes here across these 2 shows. I highly recommend The Americans, too. I thought it was an excellent show. Anyway, guys, what is one-ish about Kate? Let me start with TJ Ingrassia. I can see him chomping at the bit to talk about what's one-ish here. So go ahead.
Well... I think if you find a character who's got a stick all the way up their ass, they're not automatically a 1, but it's a good starting place. Yeah. She's all business. She is She has things that she wants done the right way. Any person, the stick up the ass is not necessarily indicative of a 1, but any human being who utters the sentence, "It's about fundamental respect for institutional norms," that person is automatically a 1. She's woefully disinterested in sort of like the pageantry and the pomp. She just wants to get the job done. So at the beginning of the series, she's supposed to be a diplomat going to Kabul in Afghanistan, and then she gets sort of switched around and she gets sent to England. And there's a scene later in the season where she's talking with one of her friends who is still in Kabul, and she's basically telling Kate how horrible things are. One of the interesting things about the show that how do I say this? They weave in so many real-life, recent political world events. Yeah. It's not like they're making up a bunch of generally in a lot of shows and movies, it's like a generic quasi-Eastern European, or maybe even they make up a country because they, whatever. They're really weaving in a lot of actual events, even stuff that's very recent. Yeah. So that was an interesting dynamic. Anyway, the point is she's talking with this friend, and you can tell that she feels out of place in this role in England because the work that she really wants to be doing, the good work, the work that's more important for her, feels like this work in Kabul of getting these people out of Afghanistan and the people who are being repressed by the Taliban. And so there's this feeling of like, how would you say it? Like the work she's doing in England isn't the right work, or she's trying to get a handle on what that kind of work is. And then just a lot of classic sort of persnickety one, in one episode, she scolds Hal. He brings her a plate of breakfast, and she's mad because he mixes the eggs and the berries on the plate. She's pretty uptight. She needs to blow off steam. I'm sure, when we talk about Hal, we'll talk about some interactions she has with him. But yeah, I very much, I enjoyed living vicariously through Kate.
Good. TJ Dawe, what would you add to that?
Yeah, building on that, she is very focused on the work. She is not, and to be a bit one-ish, the word disinterested means unbiased. She is uninterested. And by the way, the expression chomping at the bit is incorrect. It should be champing at the bit. This is inspiring me to be a 1 myself. Anyway, yeah, she does not like the ceremonial aspect of being a diplomat. Something that comes up in a conversation between her husband and one of the staffers at the mansion where they're housed is that there are 2 kinds of ambassador. And one is a rich person who is given a cushy ambassadorship as a reward for donating millions of dollars to a presidential campaign. And that's the kind of person who really likes living in a mansion and going to events dressed up in formal wear and applauding and meeting the rich. And they're very wealthy. Kate and Hal are the opposite. They're career diplomats. The only money they have is their salaries from their state jobs, which they're not poor, but they're not rich. And they like going to and have a history of going to conflict areas and doing important, difficult work. So even though she is there to stop England from starting a war with Iran, as you said, this is not the same as being in Afghanistan or Iraq or some different war zone. And she's not happy about the fact that she's supposed to dress up in gowns and meet different people and have her photo taken. And she cancels all of these things whenever she can. And at one point, I gotta say,
I am glad she decided to put on that red dress in the last episode. I was a big fan of that.
She made it work.
Yeah, but you could see that she did it because she had to. Yeah. And it wasn't a guilty pleasure of like, good, now I finally have this excuse to wear this thing and look fabulous and make a big impression. It was like she was doing it strategically. She also doesn't want to be vice president. Many people would leap at that opportunity, and she doesn't want to be ambassador in the first place. That's another plot point at the beginning. This is her first ambassadorship. Her husband was always the ambassador. She was always doing a lot of the grunt work behind the scenes. So to be a public figure, not her thing. And then her chief of staff, Stewart, says to her, "You would melt on the campaign trail. You would call donors corrupt to their face. But imagine if your frankness were a plus, if your only goal was to keep the president relentlessly on track." And I love that as a description of a one, of somebody who would have a very hard time playing that smiling game of being on the campaign trail. They just couldn't do it. They would literally call their donors corrupt to their face.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's interesting about this character to me, that the oneness is so, it's so blatant, right? And all the things that you guys talked about. And I love the example of why'd you put the eggs on top of the berries? Now they have eggs on them kind of thing. And, her whole thing is about identifying problems, right? Identifying, things so that I can fix them and make the world a better place. So it's this one drive. But she's kind of careless about a lot of things, right? I mean, she's not there's a couple of scenes where they make reference to her hair, right? And she just combing her hair is like the last thing on her mind. And there's a scene where she's hungover and she's giving herself a bath before a meeting using moist towelettes, in her office. And
preserving is not her strong suit.
Exactly right. And even she doesn't eat, right? She eats with gusto, but she forgets to eat, and so Hal has to pretend it's his breakfast so she can come down and eat it, right? So even though it was his breakfast that he put the eggs on top of the berries, she's still pissed off, right? So we tend to think that ones are always squared away and always polished and very persnickety about this or about that, but she's not, and it's because not all ones are, and particularly the navigating ones. They're striving to feel perfect about very specific things. And it may not be the things you think they should think they're, perfect about. So that's what I loved about this portrayal, right? It exposes a lot of the misunderstandings. So it's this tendency to find problems. The issue of obligation, and you touched on this already, is she did not want this job. She took it because she wants to serve her country, and that's what matters. And so she will go where she is sent, even if she's pissed off about it. And when your idea is to go to work in Kabul and deal with the resurgent Taliban and their abuses of the people and all that sort of stuff, and you end up being, I don't know, socioeconomically and luxury related about as far from Kabul as you can think of.
Yeah, they're trying to turn her into Cinderella.
Yes, and she says, "I am not Cinderella," right? So I love the titles of these episodes, by the way. I thought they were really clever, and that was one of them. But so this oozes oneness all throughout. Okay? Anger. We didn't quite touch on that. Kate's got a temper to her, and there's that great scene. Again, we'll talk more about how, but when she physically attacks her husband, they're out in the yard outside the embassy, not the embassy, but the residence, the ambassador's residence, and her security detail is watching from a distance, through binoculars, and they're watching her and Hal, fighting, and one of them says to the other, should we intervene? And she says, well, she's our concern, not him, and she looks like she's doing fine, because she's kicking her husband's ass, and going at him with a stick and all this sort of stuff. So, again, temper and explosiveness is there, right? So, which
she
again
rarely smiles.
Yes,
I don't know that's not a universal one thing, but just it's like annoyance and anger all the time, because there's so many things to be annoyed and angry about.
Yeah,
and it's righteous anger.
Yes, it's indignation very often, right? And it's this, this is just not right sort of thing. Now, I do want to say, she does have a sensual side, and you'll see more of it in season 2 and, beyond. There is, look, I always say that, with everyone, there's this little freak trying to get out, right? And so, it's only a matter of time before that freak shows up. And, we see some of that with Kate as well. As the series goes on. So don't think that ones are all pure and chaste all the time. They usually or often have this little surprise side to them.
And I think, tell me if you agree with this, that it's basically a release valve. Yeah. Like there's this pressure and this steam building up inside of everyone, and it's going to come out one way or another. And so having some sort of a release valve where you can be a bad boy or bad girl, or you can do something self-indulgent or whatever, is good for ones, because, God help you if you don't have that.
Well, this is the thing, right? So, this is what we call the contradiction, right? We always, and it's usually related to one of the connecting points. In the case of the 1, it's the 7. I'd feel uncomfortable with striving to feel excited because I'm going to make a mistake, right, if I let myself go. So they start repressing this urge for excitement and indulgence and all these sort of things. But anything we try to repress starts to leak out. And if they don't have an intentional hand on that release valve, it can kind of really blow up into something, right? And so it's funny because when Maria Jose and I teach together, and Maria Jose is a navigating one herself, the examples we give are quite different, right? So, we'll talk about this, and she'll say, it could be you had some, little chocolates in your dresser drawer, at night sort of thing, so nobody sees you eating them, right? And my example is, it's like the TV preacher who ends up at a hotel down by the airport with, two hookers and an 8-ball, right? And, or playing footsies in the Minneapolis airport or something, right? So, so there's got to be this release, because we all have this need to indulge.
In fact, at one point, so part of the dynamic of the show is her relationship with her husband. They were actually planning to get divorced, but then there's this, she's being looked at as vice president. Well, if you're going to be vice president, you can't be divorced. So they're trying to figure it out. And so there's a dynamic between her and her husband, but then also her, I guess it's like sort of her chief of staff, or it's the deputy, I forget his exact
title.
Chief
of mission, deputy chief of mission, which is her basically chief of staff.
Oh, no, I'm getting them mixed up. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the guy who's the foreign secretary.
Oh, okay.
Dennison, is that his
Dennison,
name?
Yeah.
And there's
Dennison.
obviously some sexual tension between them. And so at one point, Hal says to her, if I'm leaving, you're going to need something on the side, or else you'll get surly. Right. And so obviously he recognized, he's saying exactly this. He's your release valve. You need this.
Right. Yes, and he does end up becoming the release valve. Okay. A little spoiler for season 2 there. So, all right. Okay. I'll also say that the whole, again, if we look at the TV show as a whole, the whole world of diplomacy is very one-ish, right? And protocols, and these diplomatic protocols of who is supposed to greet who, and there's this one scene where her chief of staff says to the British equivalent of him, no, you have to introduce these people because I am not, this is your embassy, you have to. So this whole world of protocols is very one-ish, right? What are the rules? Because the violation of those protocols can have such devastating consequences, right, with misunderstandings, and that can lead to wars or something like that. So so anyway, I would say that this whole world that they're living in is very one-ish as well.
Well, I think that brings us pretty cleanly into navigating, because it's also very navigating. Everything you've just said is like role clarity, protocol, unwritten rules, written rules. That's all the navigating world too. So what a navigating one combination this show is.
Yes, absolutely. So say more. Continue on with the navigating and why this show is so navigating in general.
So among other things, this is at least a little bit a story of a fish out of water. Kate is an American in England. She is a career diplomat, but she's, as we've talked about, not used to being in first world countries. Hal gets in there and he just wants to do stuff right away. And she has this great navigating line. It's like, when you land in a new post, there is wisdom in spending a week or a month with your mouth shut and listening. That to me seemed like the quintessence of navigating right there. of like, let's take in what's going on, who's who and what's what, and how do I operate in this environment in order to survive and be effective to my role and to the higher purpose as a one who's been assigned to be there for a very important reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. TJ, would you add anything to the TJ Ingrassia?
Well, I guess, I don't know if this is the right time to jump into this or not, but I guess I felt like this show was a great example of why navigating is such the best word to describe this instinctual bias and not social. Because Kate, while being a very strong navigator, is not particularly social. She's not really a people person.
Right.
So, Mario, help us unpack, what does it mean to be, this might be too exaggerated, but almost like an antisocial navigator. What does that mean?
Yeah. So you're right. Again, and this is why I don't use the term social, because social has implications. Often we think it's being extroverted, it's liking people, it's wanting to, be the belle of the ball sort of thing. No, it's not. It is about understanding how the group works, where I fit into it, how I can function in it, all these sort of things. So it is about tracking group and, people dynamics. Okay. So, often, and again, she is very conscious of who she is and how she fits in, right? She knows that she doesn't like all that stuff, and she knows why she doesn't like all that stuff, but she's aware of it, okay? And so, but she is focused on navigating in what she sees as more important domains, right? I know how the world works. I know how to work behind the scenes to get stuff done in the world, right? I know how to build relationships with the people that matter and how to go at this and how to go at that, what levers to pull. I can see the chess pieces on the board, right? Which she's kind of a master at, right? She's the one who's figuring out all this stuff that's happening. And I will say that there are further reveals that go on, you've seen her go from theory of the case to theory of the case. At first it was the Iranians, and then it was the Russians, and then it was, Trowbridge and all this sort of stuff. There are additional revelations, but she's the one finding them out. Okay, because she is thinking about the relationships between people. She's observing the things that people say, the things that she does, right? There's that one scene where Trowbridge mispronounces Hama and says Hamo instead. And that just doesn't get past her, right? She's like, oh, okay, wait. And, she understands the implications behind that. So you can be good at navigating while still being antisocial if you're aware of your antisocialness and use it to your advantage and help further you in the areas where you really want to navigate and not get distracted by things that you don't see as important. Mm-hmm. Right? I
was just thinking, there's a great line from the film Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis where he's arguing with Tommy Lee Jones. And what's his character's name?
Was it Seward?
Stevens?
I don't recall, but I remember the scene.
Thaddeus Stevens.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm paraphrasing, I've worked my whole life for the good of the people without giving a damn for any of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that.
That is such a great way to put it, right? Because it's not about the individual. And it doesn't mean that they don't care about individuals and that sort of thing. They're not compassionate towards the individuals, but they're playing the whole chessboard and they're not getting distracted by the fate of a pawn, right? Is a way to think about it.
There's a scene in one of the earlier episodes where she realizes that the U.S. Secretary of State does not like her and is going to arrange for her to be fired. And then she puts the Vogue photo shoot back on the schedule when she had canceled it before because she was not interested, like we've already talked about, of being this figurehead, of being a public figure, of dressing up pretty and smiling for the cameras. But then she realizes if I do that, that makes a story out of my appointment and you can't fire Cinderella. So she does it because it's necessary, because it furthers the cause, because it helps, and not because she particularly wants to be ambassador in England or relishes living in this huge mansion, but because she has been appointed to do this and there is important work to do there and she doesn't want that disrupted.
Yes.
So she can play the game as needed. It's not her natural thing, but she can do it, and she does it well.
Yeah. And we can look at that as an example of the zone of interconflict for navigators, which is the transmitting domain, right? She seems indifferent to how she dresses, right? She's always talking about wanting to wear black pantsuits and so the red dress and the blue pantsuit and these other sort of things are like, and let alone being photoed in a gown in a carriage in front of this palace, okay? But like you said, when she understands it as part of her job, part of her getting what she wants, then she can kind of lean into it, right? I'm going to rock this red dress. Right, I'm going to make this carriage work, but again, it's a strategic action. It's not because I'm going to be in the cover of Vogue, right? I mean, it's not a transmitting sort of thing. Okay, it's transmitting for a navigating purpose. Here,
and when she's in that red dress, you don't see it as like she's fulfilling a guilty pleasure of like I've wanted an excuse to let this part of me out, and now I can finally do it without my inner critic giving me shit about it. She does it well, but she doesn't steal the attention of the whole room. Right. She's still playing a part in a bigger event.
Right. Yeah. And we see these all throughout, right? There's a great scene when the vice president shows up in, I think it's season 2, they're played by Allison Janney, and Allison Janney is lecturing her about her appearance, right? And basically telling her, look, this safety pin thing you have holding your pants up, that's cute and all, but that ain't going to cut it, right? And you need to do something about the hair, and you need to do this, and you need to do that, and basically telling her you need to step it up if you want to become vice president at some point. And it's at that point that we'll see Kate say, oh, okay, if this is part of the role I have to play, I will do these things, right, to at least to the minimum viable amount that I have to do.
Yeah, it's interesting that, I mean, obviously Keri Russell's a very beautiful woman, but she's not like overly attractive in this show. It's not like they have a ton of makeup on her. She has the look of a woman who doesn't much care about that kind of thing. And so I think they did a good job of showing her literally on camera how she would actually look.
Right. Yeah, you can't see Margot Robbie playing that role, right? Or something, right? But
we can dream, but not so much.
Yeah.
But you're right. It would change it.
Yeah. And again, this is where, typecasting is for a reason very often, right? So it makes sense. All right. Let's see. Any other thoughts on Kate and navigating? I have a few that I'll add, but what do you guys have?
Well, something I mentioned briefly before. There's a lot of indirect communication in this show. So one of the plot points is, like I mentioned, trying to figure out, okay, did Iran perpetrate this attack? Did somebody else? And it's Kate that figures out how to use a phrase that Iranians will pick up as code for let's meet by the dumpsters and talk. And it's her that figures out that they got the message. It's all indirect. It's all subtle. And she is dialed into that.
Yeah. And it's not even used, that phrase, in a major announcement, but like put it in page 3 of the Foreign Policy Journal or something like that, right? So it's very strategic in the way that she does it. And this is the thing we see about Kate, which again is all navigating stuff, right? I know how they're going to read this. I know what they need to hear. I know how they're going to interpret it. I know how they're going to respond to it. And that's why we're going to do it this way.
Yeah. Reading between the lines is a big navigating thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, here's what we're saying on the surface. Here's what we're really saying. And one navigator doing that to another will get the message across.
Yes. And this is why people can find navigators so frustrating sometimes, right? So, particularly transmitters. It's like, why don't you just come out and say it, right? It's like...
And similarly, somebody watching this show or another show that's about navigating might at a certain point just say, I don't actually know what's going on. Because if you're not giving it your full attention, if you're not as tuned in to the subtle, to the nuances, to the unspoken communication, it's like, okay, why did that person just do that? What just happened? Why is that person suddenly mad at that person?
Yeah.
Another favorite scene in this season for me was when she meets with the Russian ambassador. And it's behind closed doors. It's just the two of them. And he starts chewing her out and then passes her a note with directions on where to go. And she reads it and leaves out the back door, and he continues to yell at her even though she's not in the room. And she goes into another building, down the stairs, another building, meets with another person, gets a message from them, comes back. He's still yelling.
Yes.
As it's understood, we are maintaining the facade that I am chewing you out, but we are on the same side.
Yeah, because there are people listening outside and outside the room, and they know that people are listening, and so they're putting on this whole this whole show for that. Yeah.
Optics is a big thing in this show, and it seems to me also a big navigating thing of like, how will X be perceived? So is it necessary for us to meet in secret? Or if the American president meets up with the British PM and they get photos taken together, that will make it seem like he's endorsing what the PM just said about raining hellfire on Iran. So they can't do that. So let's switch that to a private lunch just between the two of them and things like that.
Yeah.
So she's very aware of that. And she's not, a transmitting one might be more disdainful of that, of like, we need to act with 100% integrity. We cannot obfuscate. Whereas she's like, this is how the game is played. This is how we need to arrange the chess pieces.
Yeah. There's that great scene where she's sitting with the Russia experts, Trowbridge and the three Russia experts, and the chair is too big for her, right? And so she's trying to move the chair, and they start having this conversation about the chair, and the one very British guy says, oh, can we get a more, female appropriate chair or gender neutral chair or something like that? But it's just this great line. And then, ends up handing her a cushion. And so it's this whole aside about the implications of being in a chair that's not the right size for you in a diplomatic environment. Okay? Because it sends a message, right? If you're in there's this great couple of books back from the 80s when it was the red tie, Gordon Gekko power, environment. A guy named Michael Korda, who was, I think they had a Random House Publishing at the time, wrote a book called Success and another one called Power. They were these trade paperbacks on how to be successful, how to look successful, how to be powerful, how to gain power. And it was all about, make sure your chair is higher than other people's, right? And so when you have somebody sitting across the desk from you, the light should be behind you, so they have to squint, and, their chair should be lower, and all these things. It was just this wonderful, again, all this navigating stuff of, how to Machiavelli, like, create an image of power. Yeah. All right. Anything else on that?
One more navigating thing. I've got a heading: connections and alliances. That's a big part of diplomacy, and that's a big part of this show, is who is allied with who. And is this a blatant alliance, or is it behind the scenes? And a quote that I wrote down is, we exist in a marketplace of favors. And people do things for people they like. So at one point, the Russians subtly offer Lenkov, who is believed to be the architect of the attack that happened on the British ship, and she picks this up, and then that throws that into the whole situation of like, why would the Russians give up one of their own?
Yeah.
Are they trying to firm up a line, or are they playing with us?
Yes.
So can we trust this tip of theirs, and so on? And who's behind all of this? So that's a big part of this show, and I would say a big part of this doesn't quite qualify as this, but any espionage show, which The Americans is an example of.
Yeah, and there's the part where she figures out that they're going to execute him, or she's told that they're going to execute him, and that, again, is another clue. It's like, well, wait a minute, who benefits from that? And that leads her in a different direction and so forth. But again, it's reading the signals and not just stopping at that first-order fact like most people would do. A couple of things, again, I'll add here about Kate. I mean, the whole thing is about who's connected to who knows who, what the relationships are. It's all about systems. It's all about people. Her whole thing is about contribution and belonging, right? I do not belong here. I do not fit here in this embassy. I don't have my own art collection to put on the wall like the previous diplomats did or the previous ambassador did. So it's, I'm a fish out of water here, and TJ, I know you've identified the fish out of water theme as kind of a navigating thing, and again, we see this in Kate. She's adjusting to this, even though she is very navigating and understands relationship dynamics and protocols at a certain level, she's now operating at a level where she doesn't quite understand them, and she's in a rush to try to figure them out.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines from the season, I forget exactly when this happens, but she says, I spent a decade building a reputation in a community such that when I say something, people fucking listen to me. Mm-hmm. I have none of that here.
Yeah.
And so this is a perfect navigating one line, because obviously she's talking about a community and her reputation and the respect that the community has for her. But also for a one, if a one gives you advice, obviously, because the one has given you the advice must be correct, right?
Yes,
and so it just breaks a one's brain to think, well, I told you this thing, therefore it's the right thing to do. Why didn't you do that thing?
Yeah.
So this is like doubly hard for her.
Yeah. You use the word community there. And again, I want to use this to draw the distinction between social, quote unquote, and navigating. Navigators are conscious of community, but not in the way of, I need to have my community and I need to be connected to these people and I don't feel right if I don't have my people, et cetera, et cetera. They think of community in the same way you would look at a New York City subway map when you're about to get on the train somewhere. It's like, okay, I want to figure this all out, figure out how it interacts so I know how I get from point A to point B. Okay? And I don't necessarily feel emotionally connected to it. It just helps orient me, right? So, I have this community where people would listen to me, but it's not because they love me and I love them and I can't do without them and all this other sort of stuff. But no, we get the rules. Right, we have figured out how this works. Now I got to go somewhere else and figure out how things work again. So, all right. The show, again, like we said, I just want to reiterate, it is. I asked Claude to do some analysis on this, and it writes back to me that this show is, in a sense, a 60-minute per episode study of the navigating bias. So, and it really is, right? I mean, it's just all about navigating stuff. Let's see. There's a great line. I forget who says it. I think it might be Kate, where she says that no one with the temperament to win a campaign should be in charge of anything. Okay? Which is really interesting, and it touches on this razor's edge that navigators walk on, right? It's like the things that often get me to win a campaign are the things that exclude me from being, worthy of serving in the role. Right. And so what is the right amount of shape shifting? What is the right amount of rule bending before I lose my credibility and lose my integrity? I'll go back to Lincoln since you mentioned it earlier, TJ. There was a line where he says to somebody, what is the benefit of having a true north if you get lost in the swamp on your way there?
It's the same scene when he's talking after Thaddeus Stevens says that other line. Lincoln says that.
Okay, all right, yeah, and so it's this thing. It's like, I mean, sometimes you gotta kind of break the rules, and to get. It's not quite the end justifies the means, but it's starting to ask yourself, okay, what means can we justify in order to get to the end?
One of the great flaws of our system and so many political systems, that the people who can make it through the ringer to the end probably shouldn't be there, and the people who could never make it through are the ones who should be there.
Two words of evidence to support that premise: Spencer Pratt. Right. So I'm not going to say anything more. Google it, folks. So, all right. Let's combine these two things here. Navigating one. Thoughts on why Kate represents not just navigating or type 1, but TJ Dawe, why do you think she's a navigating 1?
She acts appropriately. That to me seems quintessentially navigating 1 thing. She will assert herself, she will stand up for what's right, and never lose sight of where she is in the pecking order and who she's speaking with. So in an early episode, she's having a conversation with Gannon, the Secretary of State, who she discerns does not like him, and he's hostile, and she stands up to him, but diplomatically, and insists they need to hear this from you. And even though he pushes back, she holds her ground. There's another scene where the dining room is adjusted to a 2-person lunch between the U.S. president and the British PM, and she goes to get them for that, and her husband Hal is regaling both the president and the PM with a funny story. And she stands at the side and waits for him to finish and does not give him the stink eye, does not radiate, we don't have time for this nonsense, but is perfectly appropriate, waits for them to stop joking around, and then says it's now time to go into the lunch.
Yeah. TJ Ingrassia, anything you would add about the navigating 1?
Yeah, there's one line from this great book called Instinctual Leadership.
Oh, that's a good one, I've heard. Yeah, there you go.
I'm not sure about the author, but the content's pretty good.
Yeah.
I wasn't crazy about it.
From the section Working with Navigating 1s, it's easy to overestimate the navigating 1's self-confidence. They often appear very poised and in control, though underneath they feel self-doubt because of high expectations they've placed on themselves. Kate has this... she is confident in the things that she knows, but it's, she's racked with like this constant guilt and this pressure of like, is this the right thing? Am I this isn't the right role for me. I shouldn't be here. So it's this back and forth of confidence, but also self-doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge, and you're right, that book is just filled with those kind of nuggets throughout. So, Kate has a lot of self-doubt, right? There is this, the kind of this imposter syndrome thing happening. And yet when she has these, when she reaches a moral clarity, get out of her way. Right. I mean, it's just like full steam ahead. But there is this back and forth. And again, this is something you'll see in navigating 1s, right? I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to understand what's the right thing to do. Once I get it, man, boom. Right. And absolutely. That's navigating 1. Another thing I really like there, okay, so we've talked about her indifference to her appearance and so forth, but there's a nuance to that. And there's a scene in a later episode that we watched where she goes to Washington. Okay? And the idea is that she's being called there to, she's going to go and present something to the president and ends up, standing in a room full of people for 40 seconds and then, getting ushered out. But her chief of staff gives her a light blue suit to wear instead of the black suits that she likes. And she gets some yogurt on her inner thigh. She spills some yogurt. Somebody points it out. She's trying to clean it off and ends up making a bad situation worse by creating a big puddle on her leg. When she gets back to England, she points it out to her chief of staff and she says, "This is why I wear black." Right. And so the wearing of black is not just because I don't care, but it's very strategic. I am sending a very I have made a decision about this, and I am doing what is appropriate. So I am ensuring that I will meet the baseline of appropriateness for whatever situation I am in. Okay. And that might mean that I'm not going to stand out. But nobody will ever be able to point to me and say, "You've got yogurt on your thigh, you loser," right? So, and this is important to understand about the navigating 1, right? It's, I want to be able to fit in. I don't want anybody to be able to say to me, "You screwed up." Okay? So,
and
thoughts?
I don't want to have to think about these things.
Yes.
If I consistently wear black, then that part of my life is taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm appropriate in any situation. I look nice. I don't look sloppy. But I don't have to fuss over it. I don't have to spend my time and mental energy on something that I don't find important. I acknowledge that it's necessary, but I don't want to spend any more time on this than I need to.
Yeah. And I think part of it is because she knows she's basically a klutz. There's this recurring theme of she's tripping and she's dropping things and she's spilling stuff on herself. And so she knows about herself, wear black because I'm going to get yogurt on my pants at some point. So I may as well wear black and get out ahead of this thing.
Yeah, I'll share with you. So I am notorious for spilling things on myself, right? My wife it's just this, ongoing thing she's been dealing with for 25 years. And so I bought a few new crisp white Brooks Brothers Oxford shirts recently, right? So we went down to Washington.
Red flag.
Yeah, exactly, right? And she said, really? And I said, no, I can pull this off, And so we go to Washington. We're there on Friday. We're having dinner at this lovely Spanish tapas restaurant, and I'm drinking sangria, right? And at one point, she looks over at me and says, is that just water, or do you have a stain on your shirt, right? And so I looked down, and it's just water, I'll get back to the hotel later. And they are sangria stains, right? So I've got these 4 sangria stains, and then I got this red stain on the side. God knows what it is. It's this bright red stuff. It's like somebody smeared red, cherry red paint on my shirt or something, And, and again, it was that thing where it's just, look, it's going to happen. So just wear black, will you? Please just, save me time in the laundry. Just wear black, please. No. Anyway. All righty. So enough of my tortured psyche. Let's move on. Let's get back to Kate here. You talked about the klutziness and the indifference to things. Again, it's that indifference to preserving stuff. Okay, it's we mentioned this, but it's the food. She doesn't think about, I've got to go make myself some food. She goes down and she eats house food because it's easier and it's not something I have to think about. But he knows what she wants to eat, and so he prepares stuff for her very specifically. But when she eats with Gus, is that scene where she's with Dennison in the French bistro eating the mussels, right? And it looks like she just, she's an ex-convict, who just got released. And
she's going for it.
She's going for it, man, And so again, it's that kind of, that hidden lustiness of the one, and this, again, this indifference to the preserving sort of things, no interest in making money, and so forth. All right. What else do you have? Any other navigating one stuff?
Negotiating. That's a big part of what she does. And in fact, there's a scene when she's conferring with another character, I can't remember who, about her marriage. And she says, I feel like the stand-up thing to do is to give a relationship every possible chance. It's the whole definition of my life's work that there's nothing you can't talk out. That seems pretty navigating to me, very navigating one. Of like, that's what she's dedicated her life and her career to. And then goes on to say, but at a certain point, I'm a moron for failing to learn a lesson I've been taught 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And this gets into the kind of the push-pull of her marriage. And we'll get into the other characters, and particularly Hal soon. Yeah. But having somebody who's a good negotiator is like, you would want a navigating type for that. And I think you would want a navigating one, especially when the stakes are as high as they are, which is war. Yeah. International alliances.
Yeah. It's an interesting point, and I'd be very curious to start looking at, some of the top negotiators. You take somebody like Richard Holbrooke comes to mind, who was, a big State Department official and, negotiated a number of wars during the Clinton and first Bush administrations. Very one-ish sort of quality to him. And the other one, Richard Haas, who's the head of the Center for Foreign Relations, I think it is. Again, they seem like ones, right? They have this ability to kind of cut through the fuzziness of things and get to the heart of it. Lee Kuan Yew, the president of Singapore, was probably a navigating one. So, anyway.
And if we compare that to the Haley Steinfeld character in True Grit, we see her negotiate. It's a very different game. It's much more of a domination.
Yeah, there's not a lot of win-win with with Maddie, right? So,
yeah, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah,
even though I'm much younger than you.
Yes. Yeah.
You could say the same thing about Gandhi in the movie Gandhi, of like no quarter, no exceptions.
Yes.
And he takes on the British Empire and wins.
Yeah. Let's transition here and talk about Hal, her husband. So Hal is a great character. And I'll tell you, it took me so long to be able to remember Rufus Sewell's name, right? I mean, Sewell's name. I mean, he's an actor I've seen a few times, and he's great in this. But boy, oh boy, I don't know. It's just me, I'm sure, and getting old. But I just kept having to go back. And what's this guy's name again? But it is Rufus Sewell. Anyway,
he's that guy. He's one of those.
He is one of those that guys.
I just
right?
called him that guy.
Right.
That guy with the cheekbones.
Yes.
With
very handsome man, if I don't mind saying.
And since we're on that topic, I guess he's a guy that's gotten handsomer as he's aged. He's a very handsome middle-aged man. So
it did take me a couple episodes to get used to it because he's a British actor playing an American in Britain. And so I didn't exactly buy his accent the first couple episodes. I got used to it eventually, and I was fine with it, and I think he does great. But that threw me off just a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so Hal, her husband, Hal Wyler, he was... Prior to this, he was always Ambassador Wyler, but now he is playing "quote unquote" the wife, and struggling, we will say, or to play that role, and quite frankly, not really playing that role. I mean, Hal had an agenda. Okay, so I'll turn it over to you guys. Thoughts on Hal?
Seems like a transmitter to me for the exact reasons that you said. Like he's much less able naturally to be behind the scenes. He's much less able to be in the support role. He's much more inclined to let's make something happen. I'm going to make things happen. I'm going to draw attention to myself. I'm going to be one of the major pieces on the chessboard rather than outside the board or a pawn.
Yeah. TJ Ingrassia?
I feel like he is a 7. Do we agree or disagree?
Interesting.
And I'll say why. I felt like if you boil him down, the main vibe that I got from him, if I had to say, what is this guy striving for? I felt like he's striving to feel excited, that he wants to be in the action. There's this line that Kate says later in the season. It's something like, Hal's a thoroughbred, and you have to run him, or he'll tear the barn down. Now, that could apply to a 3, maybe. A 3 needs to get out there and be active and achieve things. But I feel like for Hal, one, I guess maybe I'm just biased and invested in this idea of the tension between a 1 and a 7 and the interesting dynamics that creates. And he just seemed like he has this FOMO thing. He doesn't want to be the first wife or whatever the technical term is for whatever he's supposed to be. Because it felt to me like he wants to be in the action. He wants to be a part of what's happening. And so that's just sort of the vibe that I got from him. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm going to say it's not a clear, perfect portrayal, right? I think, and it could be for a variety of reasons, right? It could be an actor role mismatch. It could be just, evolving characterization as the show went on and they started to get a better sense of Hal as a character. There's a lot of 3 stuff going on there, right? I played with 7 for a while, right? Because there is that sort of just this lightness to him in a sense, right? There is this kind of, and everybody loves him, even though he is chaos on wheels. Everybody, he's Hal, right? And how do you not love Hal? And so, navigating 7 is interesting, and I went back and forth between transmitting and navigating, right? Because I see what you're saying, TJ Dawe, about this. He's clumsier about it, certainly, than she is, right? But she's a navigating 1, okay? And as a navigating 8, look, my business partner is a navigating 1, okay? And so there were some things in this, this dynamic that were like, oh, geez, here we go. No wonder she's so, And, so she often sees her job as to keep me from burning the house down, in a way, right? Or wrecking the barn, as it were. And she'll even say sometimes, I just got to let them go sometimes, I know it's going to be a mess, but if I don't, it'll be a bigger mess and, kind of thing. So I can, kind of relate to that, klutzy, navigating in service of the bigger picture, in my mind, of navigating and so forth. Because as I was going between 3 and 7, so look, he has an agenda, okay, and his agenda becomes more and more clear through the season, and by the time you get to season 3, you're like, whoa, this dude, man, I mean, he really has an agenda, and
that's true. I only have the context of season 1, so there's probably some additional characterization that's helpful there.
And again, this is the challenge of typing, particularly in a character that is not, it's a main character, but it's not as focal for the show as the Keri Russell character is. So just the fact that he was able to spend so much time talking about her in conversation rather than himself, right? One of the things I see about transmitting 3s and even transmitting 7s is this, the need to be the center of attention is more Arnold Schwarzeneggerian. It's like, I've got to be, this has to be about me, right? If I'm in the room, it's about me. And
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise. It's like, I am here, I am talking, and I'm talking about me and what I am doing. And when the topic changes, I'm going to wander off. I was leaning between navigating 3 and navigating 7 for this, with a slight tendency toward the navigating 3. But again, I don't think it's a pitch perfect portrayal. So, and I can see the transmitting stuff that you're talking about, TJ. I mean, he's dynamic. He's, but he his dynamism is not, I walk into the room and immediately take it over, right? It's a bit more subtle than that. It's, he reads people, I think, pretty well, and he's operating behind the scenes in a really skillful way. And it's deceptive very often, right? He's not being truthful with people. He's not, he's working the back channels, very, very deeply here throughout. So I would lean a bit more toward that personally, but again, I don't think it's a slam dunk case for either. I don't know, thoughts, pushback, reaction?
Well, transmitting 3 was my guess, and a big part of at least what's happening in season 1 is, I see it as a big part of what his character is going through is, how the hell do I not be the center of attention?
Yeah.
And he actually does that successfully after a while, which absolutely turns on Kate. She becomes more attracted to him when he learns to keep his trap shut. And he's proud of himself for being able to do that, to not give advice when the PM asks directly, to say, I'm going off to go bird watching, rather than answering your question. In the way that I myself as a transmitter have patted myself on the back for listening rather than talking in different social occasions, of like, look at me, going beyond what I normally do. Isn't that impressive? Ceding the floor to somebody else? Wow.
Yeah. See, I hear that, and I think it's a great observation. I see that as subordinating my ambition to somebody else's, right? Which could feel kind of 3-ish to me, as much as transmitting, because, I have just found that most transmitters can't sustain, that shutting up, right? So, for what it's worth, I don't know. So, valid arguments.
But I think regardless, we'll say he's a bit of a conflicted character.
Yeah.
But I think it's still a great dynamic between him and Kate. that,
Absolutely.
he's this chaos agent. She's trying to clean up the messes he makes, but they make a really good team. Actually, when I was thinking through it this morning, I was sort of reminded of the Batman and the Joker, and how it's sort of this, there's a great line from The Dark Knight where he says, you complete me. This yin yang thing where this chaos agent, needs someone to kind of help rein them in, and he's pulling her out of her shell and helping her, in some ways being that release valve for her. And so the energy in their relationship is really what keeps it. That's the most fun part of the show for me.
Yeah. Completely agreed, and it's all very believable. It's when she tackles him in the yard and starts swinging a big stick at him, you can believe it, right? It's like this guy, I love him and I want to crush his head with a big club, right? So it's a great dynamic.
Something like what's the line? Opposites attract and then they attack. Whether he's a 3 or a 7, I think both of those can be the kryptonite for a 1 for different reasons. And so whatever that mix is going on in him, it's the perfect kryptonite for her.
Yeah. And it's because the way he navigates is not the way it should be done, right? Is, kind of when it comes down to it, you're breaking the rules here, right? You're playing by your own set of rules, and it's gumming everything up. It's making my life more difficult, etc.
The Chief of Staff, Stewart, has a line that he says to him near the end of the season. There's a line, it's porous, but it's there. And when you vault all the way over it, the rest of us spend all of our time compensating. Then people like Ronnie have to sit in meetings and awkwardly take notes to prove the White House is not a fee-for-services organization.
Yeah.
He doesn't take that well. He pushes back, but there's a lot of legitimacy in that accusation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And when he decides to forego the Chatham House rules so that he can be, get to the attention of the Chief of Staff to the president, right? And it's all manipulation. It's all, I have betrayed this trust that my wife put in me so that I can, pursue my own ambition. And it's definite breaking of the rules. I got something going on in my eye here. Excuse me, guys.
Yeah, what she discerns deep into the season is that he seems to have an ambition to become U.S. Secretary of State.
Yes.
Which he doesn't deny when she brings it up. He never states it blatantly, but it's like, you've had this agenda going on the whole time.
Yeah.
And she's not impressed with that. But it's like, it doesn't seem like it wouldn't fit. You can picture him rising to the occasion of being in that prominent position and relishing it and doing it very well.
Yes. And he is more than willing to put her in, professional danger to get what he wants, right? I mean, he's using her to go after the existing Secretary of State, in a way that could end her career just because he wants that position.
And he's also got a lot of substance. We don't get the details on this, but we find out that he has been in serious danger more than once in his diplomatic career. He is committed to this profession in a real way. He's not just doing it to look good or doing it to get the big prize at the end.
Right.
You get the sense he likes being in these danger zones. He likes negotiating with dangerous and difficult people.
Well, he gets what he wants at the very end of the last episode of season 1. So I'm interested to see what happens.
That is one hell of a cliffhanger.
It's a good cliffhanger, although they would never kill him off. So obviously he's going to be okay. But what's going to happen? I'm interested.
Yeah. But there is some sadness that comes out of that. So I encourage you to continue watching to see the resolution of that. It was it's well done, and it plays off that. Again, it touches on this kind of let's remember what's important here, right? Let's remember the humanity in the individual, so that even though she's so furious at him, oh geez, he almost dies, let me get some some perspective again. So anyway, and we see that in a couple of the relationships. So let's touch on a couple of other characters, and then we'll talk about other navigating ones. I do want to make one point. I'm looking at the picture of Bonhoeffer over TJ Ingrassia's shoulder, and it reminded me of a comparison that came to mind as I was thinking of the differences between Maddie in True Grit and Kate in this one, and the preserving one versus the transmitting one. The transmitting ones tend to be more black and white, right? They tend to have this kind of moral high ground, almost Kantian, right? Of there are these categorical imperatives that thou shalt not kill, right? You know that's it's black or white. You either do or you don't. And whereas the navigating one tends to be more of a Peter Singer utilitarian, right? Okay, what's the most good for the most people here, and how does that affect the rules? Okay, so just thought to keep in mind as we think about the distinctions between these two characters.
Well, that is one of our headings in our structure, is how would this story have played out with a preserving one or a transmitting one? Yeah.
So touch on that. So how would it have been with a transmitting one?
I think she would have been more assertive and commanding. I think she would have been less able to make it seem like her good ideas are others' good ideas. Mm-hmm. She would have been more ambitious. She would have taken more to being a public figure and a figurehead. She probably wouldn't have as much of a career as being behind the scenes, nor would she have hesitated to be appointed ambassador to England. Right. It would have been like, at last, I get to shine. She would certainly not have canceled the photo shoot.
Yeah. TJ Ingrassia, anything you would add to that?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah, definitely more of a blunter kind of figure of let's cut to the chase here. Less time for nuance, less time for for reading the tea leaves.
More of a zealot.
Yeah. How about a preserving one? Yeah, how about a preserving one?
I think a preserving one would be less likely to have had this career where you go where you're sent. There are long and erratic working hours. There are completely variable living conditions, zones of conflict where you're not safe. And in this situation, like let's say a preserving one had simply been appointed ambassador of England, there would have been a lot more reveling in the fact that I live in this amazing mansion with these huge grounds right in the middle of London, as well as she would have more regular exercise and healthy eating and sleep, just at least some attention to her creature comforts.
Fewer yogurt stains, probably.
Yeah, fewer yogurt stains. Put a coaster under that, kind of thing. Right? I don't see John Book being ambassador to England, right? Just I don't have time for all this, all this silliness, right? So let's, keep it very boxed in, even if they're in the role. So, so any other characters? Anybody want to speculate on the Enneagram types of any of the other characters? Any thoughts on Stuart, for example?
Navigating 3 is my guess for him. In that he's strategic, he's well-spoken, he's deferential, he knows his stuff. He's very good interpersonally. He will back off exactly when needed. He'll assert himself when needed.
Yeah. Agreed. I think that's good. TJ Ingrassia, thoughts on that?
I didn't get a real strong read. Yeah, I buy that assessment. Yeah. I was mostly focused on Kate and Helen, so the other characters sort of receded for me. Although I will say I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed the few scenes where we get to see Michael McKean as the president, sort of playing almost like a quasi-Trumpy sort of a character. He was a blast to watch. Yeah,
for sure. Let's see. Other ones. Yeah, I think Navigating 3 sounds really good for him. I think Trowbridge. I read Trowbridge as a transmitting 6.
Transmitting 6. Oh,
yeah, there was kind of an aggressive 8-ishness to him, but. So there's the scene where they're in the room with his wife. the office with his wife, and she tells him, sit down, right? Just says to him, sit down. And he does, not an 8 there, right? So, and, there are other things where you just see, oh, wait a minute, she's, Mrs. Trowbridge is the one who wears the pants here, right? And this is not to say that, transmitting 6s can't wear the pants, but I found him to be very reactive and suspicious and bombastic in a way that didn't come from a kind of confidence that we see in 8s. So I thought it was a pretty good transmitting 6 character. Trowbridge becomes more sympathetic as we go. I'll just say that.
That's the Prime Minister, right?
The Prime Minister,
yeah.
He's not particularly sympathetic in season 1 for sure. So.
There's also that woman, I can't remember the character's name, but that older woman that he keeps checking in with.
Yes.
And not blatantly, he's doing that behind the scenes.
Yes.
But she's a very trusted advisor to him.
Yes.
So that absolutely influences the decisions that he makes and how he conducts himself in this.
Yes. And there's even the part where they say, tell him it came from her, or, she tells Kate something. Kate says, tell him this. He'll turn around and ask her what she thinks of it, the other woman you're talking about. And when she says that's brilliant, which she'll say because it was her idea, he'll say, okay. Right. So again, it's this, need for validation through this cycle that comes back. I'd say Idra, the CIA agent, probably a navigating 8. I think, she's a pretty tough cookie. And it's that great scene where he comes into the apartment late at night and she's,
pulls the gun on him.
And she says, it's a silenced Glock. And she says, well, it's not a Glock, but it's what I had,
She's got a real toughness in her energy. Like, she's a supporting character. We don't see her really in action apart from that moment. But there's just this groundedness as well as an awareness and this sizing people up that seemed very 8-ish to me.
And doesn't hesitate to break up with him when he sort of sabotages her career or crosses her and she ends it.
Yeah, and she ends it hard. It's just like, okay, we're done. You need to leave my office now. It's like, what?
No tears, no screaming.
No.
You're dead to me.
Yes. All right. So any other characters jump out? I mean, that for me, that was pretty much it. Oh, Dennison. Yeah, Dennison. Well, so that's very interesting. So thoughts on Dennison?
Navigating 1 is my guess. He seemed pretty evenly matched with Kate. Like, it was pretty easy for me to imagine them as a couple, seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. He's got a very serious affect to him. Yeah. He does what's appropriate to his job. He's very job focused. Doesn't seem to revel in his status, although he acts and dresses appropriately at all times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. TJ, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I that seems right to me.
Yeah.
I didn't get like a super strong read on him, but 2 navigating 1s ending, trying to make something work. What could possibly go wrong?
So that makes sense to me, and I would say that fits. Again, it just reinforces for me how much that world is navigating 1, right? That whole world of diplomacy. Navigating 1s are bred for it, really, is what it comes down to. All right, so we hit that. And let's see, I think our last category here is other navigating 1s in movies or TV. So any thoughts on that, guys?
Well, there's a few that we've covered on the podcast already, so to quickly go through some of those, there's Kate Macer, Emily Blunt's character in Sicario, and there's also Rita Vertasky, Emily Blunt's character in Edge of Tomorrow. There's Buttercup, Robin Wright in The Princess Bride. And you've mentioned Keri Russell's character in The Americans, Elizabeth Jennings, as a navigating 1. Some others I've got on my list, Frank Serpico, Al Pacino in Serpico. Kim Wexler, played by Rhea Seehorn on Better Call Saul. Ned Stark on Game of Thrones. Claire Dunphy on Modern Family. David Fisher on 6 Feet Under. And Viola Davis's character, General Naniska, on The Woman King. And I have not watched it, but through a conversation with you, Mario, you mentioned both the Tom Selleck and Bridget Moynihan characters on Blue Bloods.
Oh, right. Yeah, save yourself the watching it. So
didn't really seem like it would be my thing. Yeah,
I don't think it's.
But anyway. A very popular show.
It is. It's the gritty New York police story version of Hallmark. Really is what it comes down to. So anyway, TJ Ingrassia, any navigating ones you would add?
That's the only other one that came to mind. I think is Alfred Molina's character in Chocolat, the Comte de Renaud. I think he's navigating one. Have we talked about him? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah. We had a podcast episode, and the two of you got right into it. Is he navigating or is he transmitting?
Oh, did we disagree about that before?
Yeah. I saw him as transmitting, so okay. I saw him as a transmitting one. So, but we don't need to rehash that.
I retract my...
Well, that way it's,
We got a whole episode if anybody wants to hear us tease out the nuances of that.
Yeah. One that I would just add to it is... another Robin Wright character in House of Cards. I think that character is also a navigating one. So, again, probably an issue of typecasting. And if you look at the career of Robin Wright, and I think we've talked about this before, not a huge career. She doesn't seem to have this need for attention that transmitters often do. So, anyway. Okay, so folks, I think that wraps us up for this episode, another long episode, but you know what? It was riveting. I'd say pretty much every moment was worth listening to. So anyway, we are going to start transitioning to Type 4. We're not going to talk about the movies, but we have decided on the movies we're going to do there, and kind of different characters, although I think if we do the one that we talked about, the Preserving 4, it's not a huge leap from the ones, right? So we'll start to see why some types can kind of look alike. Okay? So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next time.